Hey y'all, it's Laura, and I am back with a design team layout for Cocoa Vanilla Studio using the brand new Merry and Bright Christmas collection. I was super excited to use this sort of advent paper for a background, and the idea that I had was to use the center section as a square for my photos and just to leave the numbers as a border around the outside. Now to do this, I have cut down this beautiful, beautiful star paper, and that's going to be the base for my photos. Now, I did make a little error here when I was quickly measuring. I came in with this beautiful green paper to be a solid-ish border underneath and somehow managed to mismeasure it, but you'll see how I fix that problem in just a minute. That paper doesn't go to waste. I wouldn't dare. I'm still not quite sure how I managed to do that. I think I just cut in the wrong place. Like maybe I just saw the line being somewhere it wasn't. Didn't draw it quite definitively enough. As you can see, that green paper doesn't quite fit. So my solution was to cut it into strips, and then I will paper piece it in a square around the outside and then just layer the star paper right on top. So just because you make a little measuring mistake doesn't mean you have to throw that paper away. Sometimes you can finagle it into working for you if you think a little outside the box. Now, off camera, I did trim these down just a little bit to make sure that they fit. I didn't want them to overlap because then it would create some bumpy corners at the sides because I'm layering another piece of paper directly on top of it. So now that I have that all lined up, bam, my square is back in business. So I have these two really sweet photos of my oldest daughter from Christmas last year, and this is for her album, which is a 12 by 12, and she is holding up a couple of the presents that she got at family Christmas, one of which was a set of headphones and the other was a giant bag of nail polish. And the pictures just had the perfect color scheme for this gorgeous Merry and Bright collection. I am in love with this collection, and it is so hard not to use every little bit and also hoard it at the same time. I sometimes can't decide which would be better, hoarding it and having it forever, or using every last little bit because it is just so beautiful that I want to get it on as many layouts as I can. So I end up somewhere in the center, I think, and probably using it more appropriately than a lot of collections that I own. But this one is gorgeous. And I thought these little banners down here at the bottom were kind of interesting to have the green on the left and the red on the right. Those will get to stay, but one of them does get modified slightly. And the idea with these numbers all around the outside is that I wanted to cover up just a few of them to kind of break up the pattern. So the fact that there's obviously some missing, it was going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 10. And so just to kind of make it look more intentional, I do go ahead and use some of the cut aparts from the 6x8 paper pad to cover up 3 more numbers, and that way it looks very intentional that there are gaps where my photos are located. Now, once I decide exactly where I want my photos to go, I do tend to tape them down, tape them together, and that way I can move them around as one solid piece, and it makes it a lot easier setting up my layout if I already know the angle that I want my photos to be at. I do end up adding this small tab here in between them just for a bit of fun, and once I put this floral here underneath the photos, I realized what I had to do. It was floral explosion time, and I was all in. I have fussy cut an entire page of florals from this collection and was super excited to get them on a layout. So of course this one gets to be nominated for the floral explosion. While I do end up adding a couple of smaller embellishments around the page, I want the main focal point to be the center. That's where my photos are located, that's where my journaling is going to be located. I definitely want those to catch your eye first. And so by bringing in a whole kaleidoscope of these beautiful florals, I can achieve that goal. And I'm tucking them in directly underneath of the photos because at first I wasn't sure how crazy we were going to go. If it was just going to be a mild and gentle floral explosion, or if we were going to fill the page. I think I fell somewhere in between by doing a nice thick layer of florals underneath of the photos, and then I'm going to bring those banners back at the bottom to add a bit of journaling and my title as well. So there was a lot of fussing around with florals, getting them just where I wanted them to be, and I do end up opening up that pack of fussy cut florals because I wanted more of these swags that had the beautiful leaves and tiny florals attached to them, and not just the individual flowers that come in the ephemera pack. I wanted a mix of both, but I definitely wanted more swags for the side. If you are creating a floral cluster like this one of my tips would be to use those floral swags or the clusters that are already pre-created on the outsides, and then use the single florals to fill in the gaps in between. It's also helpful to use larger florals first and set up your boundary, and then fill in with the smaller florals around the page or around the clustering so that they will fit. Because I find if you fill them in with the larger pieces first and then just nestle in the tiny ones, it just has a more natural look and it seems to work a little bit better. Another thing I'm trying to keep in mind is the colors. I don't want to stack a lot of the same colors right next to each other. I want a good variety on my page. I did find a few of these florals that had run off the edge of the patterned paper that I fussy cut them from, and so they have a hard edge. I do go ahead and cut those out as well, because I can tuck them underneath of my photo just like I did here. And I'm going to do that on both sides of my photo. This adds a level of layering and depth behind the florals that makes them feel a little bit more 3D without actually having to add bulk to your layout. But don't worry, I'm still going to add bulk to this layout because I can't help myself. I will also pop up those squares that I added around the border up onto some foam. That way they stand up a little bit as well, just for a little shadow behind them. And as I'm adding all of these florals in, I changed my mind multiple times. So don't feel like you have to get it perfectly the first time. I will skip ahead just a little bit because I spent a lot of time trying to work out where the base florals were going to go, and I went ahead and glued them down so I wouldn't change my mind again. At this point, I was trying to decide if I wanted to add more florals to fill in that white gap underneath and kind of squeeze them into the banners at the bottom, connect them if you will. And at first I wasn't sure, but as I started to fill in that gap, I realized I really liked it. I don't really like leaving gaps in my embellishing, and this would help connect all of the pieces inside of that center square together and make them feel a bit more cohesive. So I'm mostly reaching for smaller florals at this point, just to tuck into the different areas at the bottom of the floral cluster. I'm also going to be grabbing some really teeny tiny pieces to add around the edges, some little detail pieces, some of these little circles, some of the really tiny florals that I have fussy cut out, and some leaves. Adding those little details go a long way to making your layout feel finished, because quite often I find if I miss them or skip them that the layout looks nice, but it doesn't feel complete. And I often equate that to a painting or a sketch, and when you add in the fine details to a painting, like the shadowing or the outlining, it makes a huge difference to the overall feel of the painting, and I feel that applies to scrapbooking as well. So I am going to go ahead and just quickly glue in a bunch of pieces in and around these floral clusters just to attach them into the banners and make it all feel like it belongs together. This process does take a little bit of time, but in the end, all of that detail with the tiny florals nestled in with the larger florals, it gives the overall appearance of a bouquet, which is something I adore. And I do kind of have to pull up a couple of these tiny florals and move them aside for other ideas as they occur to me. And that's okay too. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to pull up embellishments, and if they don't work, make them work somewhere else. Making your overall layout exactly what you want it to be is more important than worrying about wasting one little fussy cut floral. In this case, it helped me fill in this huge gap here at the bottom left of my photos. And to do that, I just had to pull up 2 or 3 florals that were tiny that I thought were going to live there that now don't. But I'm sure they'll make it onto a future layout. Now I am using my little tonic glue pen to glue these down. I just find that the quickest and easiest way to get detailed pieces onto a layout. And I do use it quite liberally on florals, especially because I don't want those to come back up if I can avoid it. Now on the larger pieces, I use double-sided tape just so I'm not adding so much wet adhesive to the background that it causes the papers to bow. Now that's mostly out of habit because Cocoa Vanilla papers are pretty thick and nice quality, so I don't find that as much on their papers, and especially when I've got 3 layers underneath this florals, it probably wouldn't have been a problem. Now squeezing in the last few florals here at the bottom right, just finding the perfect pieces to tuck into that open white space. I finally step back and have a look at it and decide this needed something to break up the florals just a little bit and to add a bit of dimension. And so flare to the rescue, adding a flare here at the bottom right and then up at the top left of this floral cluster really helps to finish it off. It breaks up the constant florals and introduces some bright white, but it is not an empty space. And for me, that made a huge difference in finishing off this cluster and finishing off the layout in general. Coming in with some Nouveau in gold, just for some little controlled splattering, and that's it for this one. I hope you've enjoyed it. Be sure to check out the blog for detailed photos, and until next time, bye!